At 88, Judi Dench reflects on a lifetime spent inside one of the most demanding professions in the world with a clarity shaped by discipline and endurance. Known publicly for her grace, humor, and composure, she has never been mistaken for someone dramatic or confrontational. Yet her calm presence often disguises an uncompromising standard. Acting, to her, was never about personality or status. It was about responsibility. And over a career that stretched across decades of stage and screen, she encountered actors whose behavior violated that responsibility so consistently that their impression never faded. Dench was shaped by theater long before fame followed her into film. Stage training instilled habits that never left her. Arrive prepared, respect the text, respect time, and never forget that performance is collective. She carried those principles into every working environment. Anything that weakened them, she noticed immediately. While many actors pass through a professional life without friction, a smaller number stood out sharply for the wrong reasons. One type of actor she disliked the most was the one who treated the crew as invisible. These individuals arrived on set surrounded by attention, but showed little awareness of those keeping the production alive. Politeness was selective, gratitude absent, simple courtesies ignored. Dench found this behavior deeply unsettling. To her, acting was not elevated above the labor around it. It existed because of it. When someone failed to acknowledge that, it revealed something irreparable in their character. She remembers days when an actor's disregard created a ripple effect no one addressed aloud. Assistants hesitated before asking questions. Technicians grew quieter. Time stretched as silence replaced efficiency. The atmosphere thickened with discomfort. No apology followed. The work continued, but the energy shifted permanently. Dench never forgot how quickly such behavior poisoned the set, and how rarely those responsible recognized the damage. Another category that earned a lasting dislike was the unprepared performer. Dench had little tolerance for actors who arrived without mastering their lines or understanding the scene's intent. Forgetfulness was not a flaw to her. It was a signal that someone had not taken the work seriously enough. Rehearsals slowed. Scenes fractured. Momentum collapsed. She observed how others compensated quietly, filling gaps left by indifference. For someone trained on a language, careless treatment of text felt almost personal. Dench valued rhythm, nuance, and precision. She had spent her life learning how a single word could change meaning entirely. Actors who drifted through dialogue without commitment disrupted not only the scene, but the trust required to sustain it. These were not mistakes made once. They were habits repeated daily. Habits that left lasting impressions. More troubling still were those who mocked the material itself. Dench encountered actors who treated emotionally charged moments with humor or dismissed seriousness as excessive. Sometimes it was sarcasm. Sometimes it was distraction masquerading as ease. The effect was the same. The integrity of the scene dissolved. Vulnerability was undercut. What should have been protected became trivialized. Dench never believed seriousness was stiffness. She believed it was respect. The moment an actor made light of material without understanding its weight, something fundamental broke. She often recalled moments when silence after such remarks lingered longer than the scene itself. No confrontation followed, just memory. There were also those who approached every interaction as a power exchange. Trailer sizes, credits, scheduling preferences. These actors negotiated presence rather than performance. Attention took precedence over contribution. Dench watched how directors adapted, how compromises replaced intention. The work bent to soothe egos rather than serve the story. She found this exhausting. She did not argue or protest. Her response was quiet withdrawal. She finished project professionally, delivered her work, and moved on. Publicly, there were no criticisms. Privately, there was clarity. Certain environments would never be revisited. What made these experiences endure was not anger, but certainty. At 88, Dench does not revisit these memories with resentment. She revisits them as markers. They shape how she chose projects later. They refined her instincts. They taught her what behavior she would never excuse again. The actors she disliked the most were not necessarily the loudest or cruelest. They were the ones who disrupted the fragile balance required for honest work. Those who confused status with entitlement. Those who mistook attention for respect. Those who treated the craft as optional. Her recollection now is measured. She names no individuals because the point is not exposure. The point is standard. At this stage in her life, Dench does not feel obligated to soften truth for comfort. She values clarity more than harmony. And clarity, she believes, is sometimes unflattering. At 88, what she reveals is not bitterness, but resolution. The actors she disliked the most are not villains in her story. They are reminders of why she protected her values so fiercely throughout her career, and why she never compromised them, even when silence was easier. As Judi Dench's career progressed, her tolerance for disruptive behavior diminished, not from fatigue, but from understanding. Experience sharpened her perception. She learned to recognize patterns early, long before they escalated into visible conflict. By the time she reached the height of her career, she understood that discomfort on set rarely arrived suddenly. It accumulated, moment by moment, shaped by attitudes left uncorrected and standards left unenforced. One of the most persistent traits she found difficult to accept was carelessness disguised as confidence. These actors carried themselves with ease while neglecting the work beneath it. They relied on natural charm or reputation instead of preparation. Scenes suffered quietly. Emotional beats landed inconsistently. The work felt thinner than it should have. Dench saw this not as creative freedom, but avoidance. Her background in classical theater left her especially sensitive to this problem. Stage work allowed no shortcuts. Missed lines and shallow engagement were not hidden by editing or multiple takes. That discipline remained with her throughout her screen career. When she encountered performers who resisted that rigor, she felt the dissonance immediately. Acting, to her, required effort even when effort went unnoticed. Another behavior that lingered in her memory was emotional disengagement. Dench had worked alongside actors who appeared present physically, but absent mentally. Eyes drifted. Reactions arrived late or felt performed rather than felt. Listening disappeared. Scenes played out as isolated performances rather than exchanges. For someone whose work depended on connection, this was profoundly disheartening. She noticed how quickly detachment affected others. Directors adjusted expectations. Scene partners simplified choices. The work retreated to safer ground. The production might still progress, but the emotional depth diminished. Dench felt this loss acutely. She could sense when a scene could have reached something greater if everyone had been equally invested. There were also actors who challenged authority selectively. They questioned direction without offering solutions, rewrote scenes to suit themselves, resisted structure while demanding control. Dench had no objection to discussion or debate when it served clarity. What troubled her was resistance driven by dominance rather than curiosity. That behavior undermined trust and stalled collaboration. Over time, she realized how often these patterns were tolerated because of status. Well-established names were protected, their behavior excused. The burden shifted to others to adapt. Dench witnessed younger cast members struggling quietly around these personalities, unsure how to navigate the imbalance. She recognized that she, too, had once remained silent in similar situations. As her influence grew, she used it cautiously. She did not publicly criticize or confront. Instead, she adjusted her boundaries. Scripts were accepted or declined based on environment as much as content. She trusted her instincts, valuing stability over exposure. The atmosphere of a set became a deciding factor, not an afterthought. Her dislike was never impulsive. It formed through repetition. One moment could be forgiven. A pattern could not. Actors who consistently undermined focus, preparation, or respect earned her lasting disapproval. These were not misunderstandings. They were choices reinforced over time. At 88, Dench reflects on how these experiences clarified her values. She no longer confuses intensity with seriousness or dominance with leadership. She believes that true authority on set expresses itself quietly through consistency and mutual respect. Anything louder eventually reveals insecurity. She often contrasts these difficult collaborations with moments of rare alignment. Sets where everyone arrived prepared, trusted one another, and allowed space for discovery. Those environments reinforce the belief that acting flourishes under care, not control. The contrast made her earlier discomfort impossible to dismiss. Her honesty now is restrained but deliberate. She speaks not to reopen old wounds, but to define what she refuses to excuse. The actors she disliked the most symbolize more than personal frustration. They represent a breakdown in professional integrity she believes should never be ignored. These reflections are not meant to challenge the audience's admiration for famous figures. They are meant to remind viewers that work environments are shaped as much by behavior as by talent. Dench hopes this distinction survives a generation. At this stage of life, she measures success differently, not by accolades or recognition, but by the quality of collaboration she preserved. The people she disliked working with taught her as much through contrast as those she admired. The truth she offers is simple. Discomfort ignored becomes standard. Standards unprotected become regret. She refused both, and that refusal shaped the second half of her career more than any role ever did. By the time Judi Dench reached the later decades of her career, she no longer interpreted friction on set as an unavoidable part of artistic work. She saw it for what it was, a consequence of tolerated behavior. At 88, her reflections come from a place of certainty, not bitterness. What she disliked most about certain actors was not a single incident, but a consistent failure to honor the shared nature of performance. One pattern she recalls clearly was a devaluation of rehearsal. Actors arrived late, disengaged, or inattentive. Rehearsal was treated as optional, something to endure rather than use. Dench viewed rehearsal as essential. It was where understanding formed, where trust developed. When others dismissed it, the work entered the rehearsal already weakened. That damage was often irreversible. She also speaks about performers who isolated themselves socially on set, not out of focus on nerves, but out of detachment. They avoided conversation, refused connection, and maintained distance deliberately. Dench believed this fractured ensemble work. Acting was not a solitary exercise, even when the camera framed only one face. Isolation bred stiffness and miscommunication. Scenes suffered accordingly. Another group she disapproved were those who blurred seriousness with cynicism. They dismissed preparation as unnecessary, mocked earnestness, and framed care as pretension. Dench rejected this attitude outright. To her, cynicism dulled creativity. Performance required faith in the material, not ironic distance from it. She often noticed how these attitudes spread quietly. Once one actor disengaged, others followed. Energy thinned. Initiative stopped. Creativity narrowed. The director spent energy containing damage rather than expanding vision. Dench believed that these losses were rarely acknowledged, yet deeply felt. At 88, she also recognizes how easily silence protected problematic behavior. Early in her career, she learned that speaking up carried consequences. Labels followed. Opportunities shrank. So she adapted. She absorbed knowledge rather than fighting dynamics she could not change. Over time, adaptation became selection. Selection became boundary. Her reflections now are not confessions of resentment, but affirmations of resolve. The actors she disliked the most never crossed her path again by coincidence. She avoided them with intention. Not publicly, not dramatically, quietly. That was her authority. She acknowledges that some viewers may expect names. She offers none. Naming individuals would distract from what she believes matters more, honesty about conditions that damage creativity. She prefers to leave behind guidance, not controversy. Dench also reflects on gender and authority. She observed how certain behaviors went unquestioned when displayed by men, yet scrutinized when challenged by women. This imbalance reinforced a preference for working environments governed by respect rather than hierarchy. The actors she disliked most thrived in hierarchy. She did not. With age, she grew less patient with the idea that talent excused disregard. She believes deeply that talent carries obligation. The greater the platform, the greater the responsibility. Those who failed to recognize this revealed a foundational misunderstanding of the profession itself. Looking back, she finds reassurance and consistency of her principles. Time did not soften her judgment. Experience sharpened it. She is at peace knowing she did not compromise what mattered to preserve opportunities. At 88, Judi Dench's message is understated but firm. Excellence does not require cruelty. Confidence does not require dismissal. Authority does not require dominance. The actors she disliked working with violated these truths repeatedly, and she never forgot. Her legacy, she hopes, will not be defined by the people she avoided, but by the standards she maintained, the work she protected, the environment she chose, the discipline she preserved. In the end, her reflection is quiet resolution. The actors she disliked the most taught her exactly what she stood for, and that understanding, unlike fame, never faded.